Disney has made an absolute mess of Star Wars canon. Can you believe it's been 10 years since they decided to reset everything? And within a decade, it's all gone downhill. I mean, most people just think of Star Wars as a movie series, but real fans know it's so much more than that.
Oh, totally. Star Wars was this whole expanded universe of stories, books, and comics that stretched way beyond the movies. After A New Hope, the expanded universe became a major part of the franchise, with Timothy Zahn's novels being particularly significant. George Lucas had a flexible approach to canon. While he would sometimes take elements from the EU, such as Coruscant, he would ignore anything that didn't align with his vision. Although it wasn't a flawless system, there was still a strong sense of structure to how things were handled.
Exactly. And then Disney comes along in 2012, buys Lucasfilm, and decides to wipe the slate clean. Boom, everything except the movies and a couple of TV shows got labeled Legends, which is a polite way of saying non-canon. Why? Because Disney wanted to make money. Lucasfilm didn't have a steady flow of movies and shows at that time. They had George Lucas and a bunch of tech guys, but no directors and no real production pipeline. Bob Iger, the Disney CEO, even admitted that in his biography.
Yeah, and Disney needed to churn out content. The problem was the EU had already mapped out pretty much everything. There were stories from the beginning of the Jedi all the way to 100 years after the Skywalker saga. That made it too restrictive for Disney. They wanted freedom to tell new stories, so they reset everything. It didn't matter that the EU had some of the best Star Wars stories ever told. Nope. They hit the reset button and promised that going forward, everything would be equally canon.
But here's the kicker. They never actually cared about keeping everything connected. Sure, they set up the Lucasfilm story group, who were supposed to be the lore keepers, making sure all the stories fit together. But with the sheer amount of content they've pumped out, there's no way that could ever work. I mean, do you know how much Star Wars material has been released under Disney? It's insane. You've got the movies, the weekly comic releases, the Disney Plus shows, and it's growing faster than the old EU ever did.
Right? And let's be real, even if the Lucasfilm Story Group was doing their best, they can't possibly handle the flood of content that's being pumped out. It's like they're just throwing everything at us and hoping no one catches the contradictions. But true fans see it. And honestly, the only reason we're still holding it together is because Dave Filoni. He is basically George Lucas's apprentice. Filoni gets it. He's the only one who actually understands Star Wars. Yeah, he's had to change things here and there, but every time you can tell he's asking himself, what would George do? He seems to be the only one who respects the heart of Star Wars.
Exactly. The guy has had to deal with a lot of garbage from the higher-ups at Lucasfilm. Sure, he's changed some established stuff, but you can tell there's a method to his madness, unlike the rest of Lucasfilm, who seem like they're just making it up as they go along. But Filoni actually cares about the lore. Look at how they've trashed stuff like Chuck Wendig's Aftermath trilogy or E.K. Johnston's Ahsoka novel. It's like those books don't matter to them. But when Filoni changes something, he's doing it with the mindset of preserving what George would have wanted. But that whole Star Wars is like mythology excuse the other's use. Please, they're just using that as a cover for not giving a damn about consistency. Filoni, though, actually cares about the mythology just in a way that honors the original vision.
Exactly, but Lucasfilm, on the other hand, just expects fans to accept it. But let's be real, the stuff that happens on screen will always be seen as more important because more people watch it. So now we're back to a tiered canon system, just like the old EU. The movies and TV shows are on top, and the books and comics, they don't really matter anymore. So much for their promise that everything would be equally canon.
Yeah, they totally broke that promise. And honestly, I don't think they even care. Canon is such a mess now that it's impossible to fix. Take Kanan Jarrus, for example. His story of surviving Order 66 has been told two completely different ways. One in the comics and one on TV. And they're wildly different. You can't just pretend that didn't happen. At this point, the only way to stop making things worse would be to slow down on the content. And it looks like they might actually be doing that.
With comic arcs wrapping up and rumors that Lucasfilm is scaling back to one TV show a year, it seems like they might finally be realizing they can't handle the overwhelming amount of content. But the real question is, do they even care about the canon issues? It doesn't seem like it. Their current approach is becoming more dominant, especially with the shows transitioning to the big screen. It's clear that fixing the canon isn't a priority for Lucasfilm. and it looks like the inconsistencies are here to stay.